Hello, and thank you for joining me again today on the Finding Hope After Loss podcast, the podcast where we share stories of infertility, pregnancy loss, infant loss, and grief to remind you that hope can exist even after life's hardest moments. Today, I'm joined by Angela, who's a speech pathologist, bereaved mom, and grief advocate. She shares the story of losing her daughter to SIDS when she was just over 2 months old. We also talk about navigating grief, what those first moments after loss were really like, and how sharing her story became part of her healing. Hello, everyone. Today I'm here with Angela. Angela, do you mind telling us a little about yourself?
No, not at all. Thank you so much for having me. I want to start out by saying that I appreciate you so much and I appreciate everything that you bring to our space. So I'm
Thank
honored to be
you.
here.
I'm so happy to finally have you here.
It's been a little while.
Yeah.
We've been busy.
Yes.
Yes, well, my name is Angela, and I am profession-wise, I'm a speech pathologist by trade. So I work with predominantly geriatric patients. I don't really work with pediatric patients much anymore, and as we'll get into that a little bit with my story of my loss. But I work with geriatric patients, usually stroke patients, trach and vent patients, anyone who has communication swallowing needs after a huge monumental life change, typically because of something in their healthcare, strokes, car accidents, things like that. And I work in a hospital, so I see the acute side of everything. So anybody who comes in right with an acute stroke, I'll be the first person there assessing their swallow and their communication. So as you can imagine, my profession deals a lot with the grief side of things because people are losing function in their life, and family members, the patient themselves, anybody that is around that patient is like a fish out of water. They don't know what to do. That's not their forte. And so it's fielding a lot of grief. And having said that, it's what brought me into this space. I lost my infant daughter, Aviana, when she was 2 months and 2 days old. And what ended up happening was I really didn't know how to get through that at the beginning. So I started utilizing the strategies I use with my patients for myself. And then it just kind of took off and snowballed from there.
It sounds like you're doing really important work, though. I mean, that's, being that person that they can turn to, because I'm sure that they talk to you a lot about things and ask questions and things, related to their family members. And I think it's great that you have that grief understanding and can kind of help them through that.
Yeah. I think it's really important. I think it's very functional because, as we know in our grief journeys, every single person is different. And so, every family you come in contact with, every patient you come in contact with, every journey is going to be different as well. And so, you don't really have, cookie cutter answers. So, you have to kind of wear seven different hats and think outside the box. And I think that both areas kind of lend themselves very well.
Do you like working with the geriatric population?
I love it. I love it because I always say, and I think this will make sense for a lot of people, pediatrics I do like, but after I lost my daughter, it was really difficult to work with pediatrics. But even before that, a lot of children I would see, they just didn't have exposure to language or, vocabulary. And so you could get them into therapy, and in 3 months, they're off and running and they're kind of caught up with their peers. There's something very, very rewarding about helping a geriatric patient regain their ability to speak or swallow after they've been doing that their entire life.
That's a good point. I mean, something we probably don't think about, having to relearn how to do something you've done your entire life, and then suddenly one stroke changes that, or one car accident changes that, and you can't do the thing that you've always done.
Absolutely. Yep. And
Yeah.
there's a lot of grief that comes with a lot. There's a lot of life changes. There's a lot of, rewiring and reprocessing things. So, yeah, absolutely.
So, do you mind just talking a little more about your loss?
No, I don't mind at all. So, my wonderful daughter is Aviana Elizabeth. Like I said, she was 2 months and 2 days old when she had died. Unfortunately, she was not in my care at the time, which is kind of heartbreaking in itself. I worked part time at the time, and I was only allotted 6 weeks maternity leave instead of 12 because of my part time position. Kind of like mirrors what your position was. And so I had to go back to work at 6 weeks actually. And so I had childcare set up with my aunt. She has six children. She at the time ranging from the ages of like 6 to 30. didn't have any worries or anything like that with her. But it was just that she took her for the week. I had bronchitis and I went to urgent care, and the doctor had said, if you have a newborn baby at home, I would highly recommend that you're on antibiotics for 24 hours before you go grab her. So I, did all the things I thought I was supposed to be doing. I was crossing the T's, dotting the I's, and I called my aunt and I said, hey, would you mind keeping Aviana overnight? I can't come get her until tomorrow. My aunt said, that's not a problem. Absolutely. And so I'd say 2 or 3 hours later, my mother called me. I was sitting on my couch and I was just kind of relaxing. We have a newborn baby, things are crazy. We're tired, we're exhausted. And so I was just kind of trying to relax. And she called me and she said, you need to go to the hospital. Aviana is on her way to the hospital. And my initial thought was not anything drastic. My initial thought was, oh, my cousins, maybe she rolled on the floor wrong, or maybe they dropped her, God forbid, or something. I just thought maybe something like that had happened, an accident. And then I said, what do you mean she's on the way to the hospital? And my mom said, well, she's not breathing. And as a mom, you just kind of know. You just have this sinking feeling in your chest, and you're just like, that the baby doesn't come back from that. And all I remember is I just started like screaming. I just started screaming, no. What do you mean? No. And I just started screaming. And I had a friend take me to the hospital. And then my father met me there. But I remember the ride to the hospital, and she lived an hour from me, my aunt did. And so I remember trying to get any and all information that I could on the way, because I didn't know the status of my daughter. And every person I would call wouldn't answer the phone. So of course it's like, oh, what does that mean? That can't be good. So then my mother finally called me back, and that's when I was riding in the car, and she said, I'm really sorry, honey, but she didn't make it. And then my brain kind of did a complete 180, and it did things like you would say it shouldn't do. Instead of trying to process things or what's going on, or I need to call my dad or anyone like that, I just was like, oh, okay, well, I can't go to work this week, so I need to call my boss, and I need to, like, I started kind of rationalizing everything else outside of the loss at that moment in time. And so that's what happened. And so I went to the hospital and I saw her and I held her. I got to hold her for a little bit of time. I wish that I got to hold her longer. They told me I could have as much time as I wanted, which was absolutely not true. Yeah. And so they had to keep the intubation tube in to make sure that they did everything accordingly. So I didn't get to kind of have her all to myself in the way that I would like to, but passed her off. And then I left the hospital. And that was a really hard ride home. I can't really remember much else just because everything is always such a blur. But found out they did an autopsy and they could not find anything wrong with her. She was a completely healthy baby. So pretty much it was a SIDS death at that point. And then I just kind of tried to figure out what that meant for me moving forward.
Now I know with the SIDS diagnosis that it's kind of just I don't want to say like catch all, but it's like if nothing's wrong, then that's just what they call it. So I mean, it's a reason, but not really a reason, I guess.
Yeah, yep, you got that right. And that was really hard, right? Because our brain wants a reason. Our brain wants answers. So yeah, you're right. I will say I did have a little bit more information. They did say that she couldn't regulate her body temperature very well, and she had spiked a really high fever. But other than that, that's still not enough to go by. So they still ruled it as a SIDS death. But yeah, you're right. It's kind of like a catch-all, I guess, when there's no identifying cause.
I mean, yeah, it's like a reason, but it's not a reason. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I was just wondering if that's, something that would be hard to process, which it sounds like I mean, it was.
Yeah, because you want answers. You absolutely want answers. We all want answers. Like, we ask what if, right? All the time. What if I did this? And what if I did that? And if this had just happened? And if that had just happened? And then you add that layer of unknown. Well, why did my daughter die then? What was it that caused this? And not saying that a cause makes that any easier by any means. It just means that there's different layers that we all kind of walk this life in, right? And so that's just an added layer to the onion.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right, though. We always want to know the answer, like, okay, but why me? Why her? Like, why? Just why? And then even if you know the why, there's still another question right behind it. But, we're always searching for, okay, well, yeah, now that I know the reason, but why me? Or why,
Mhm.
why this one?
It's absolutely true. It's a chain reaction. But I mean, that's our brain's way of protecting us in a weird way, but that's exactly what's kind of happening. We're supposed to question the world, we're supposed to wonder why. It keeps us safe a lot of times. But yeah, when it comes to trauma and when it comes to, death and loss and grief, it has the opposite effect because you just ruminate on those thoughts. And then what you think about becomes your reality. So you just get engulfed in it.
Yeah. I know that you had said that they initially told you that you would have as much time as you needed, but then you didn't. Did they just rush you out, or did they just like, how did they handle that, I guess?
Yeah, the emergency room physician, he was really awesome. And I think that would have held true. It was the actual social worker. And unfortunately, I feel like it was more of a, this sounds awful, but I think they thought my aunt did something wrong. I mean, I know they have to investigate all deaths, but she was really adamant about like making sure that there was no reason that my daughter died in her care. And she was the one that kind of like rushed the process. And she was like, okay, honey, like we need to wrap this up. And I'm like, I mean, I've been here for like 30 minutes with my dead daughter. I'm not going to
There's
wrap
no
this up.
wrapping it up. I know.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah. Like she actually said the words wrap that we're going to need to wrap this up. And I was like,
oh my
what?
God.
Like, yeah, yeah. And so I've heard some horror stories from other people, but I've also heard some really great, amazing stories from other people where they didn't have that experience, right? But yeah. So I'm a huge advocate for educating hospital staff, to the umpteenth degree. I actually sit on a parent panel at the local hospital here. We have a 1,000-bed trauma hospital in my town, and I'll come every time they have a parent panel, or if they want to educate NICU nurses or L&D nurses. I'm always like, yep, I'll do it because I can always tell my story, because if it can help somebody else in the future, I would love to do that to prevent any further harm.
And I love that you do that because, yeah, I think I mean, I've heard a lot of the horror stories too, and I don't always think they're trying to be cruel. I think sometimes they
Mhm.
just some are just mean, some are, but some I think just don't, like you said, don't have that training, don't know how to handle it, just trying to do the best they can. But for us on the other side, it's like, okay, we just like there's a disconnect.
Absolutely. I also think it depends on like when you're in the hospital, what department you're in, right? Like this was, 10 o'clock at night, so 10 o'clock at night, the social worker on might not run into this very often or be well versed in that. And for a long time, I kind of like blamed her for that interaction. But now, as I've gone through my grief journey, I can really easily reframe those thoughts and think about how it was for her. And maybe she didn't have that training. And then instead of making it, I don't want to say negative experience, but it was a negative experience. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It's like, how can we change that in the future, right? Like, what can I do? What can my role be in that? So, not necessarily finding the silver lining or flipping the script and saying, I have to find a positive, but what is a more supportive thought for me that's going to then help me get through that? Because if I would have sat in the fact that she upset me, that would have made me hold on to that grief longer too. So, it's kind of trying to work with your own brain to tell yourself supportive things. I'm not saying positive, but
Yeah, no,
supportive.
no, yeah, I understand that. I had kind of a similar thing. I held a lot of anger at a doctor for a long time after losing Jasmine. And, I had to finally, kind of like you said, kind of reframe it in a way and to be able to let it go because it was only hurting me.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, I like your way of saying it of just, how can I make this better in the future? How can I help other parents with this? How can I, teach people from this, just something so it's not just, okay, I had the negative experience. Now I'm going to relive it every day the rest of my life.
Yeah, Yeah. And the important thing to realize is both things can coexist, right? You can still be really upset and you can still be hurt and you can still be aggravated, but let's try to counter that too so that we're not so stuck in where we don't want to be, right? Like you said, this is only hurting me. So both can coexist at the same time. But what does that look like navigating forward?
Yeah, I've had to learn along the way that holding grudges only hurts me. The other person doesn't always care. They don't even know you hold a grudge, you know?
That's a good point for life in general,
Yeah.
outside of grief. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, my mom's a counselor, so there's are a lot of things that I talk with, about her, and so that's definitely something we've talked about. And I'm like, oh, all right, fine. So now I have to practice what I say and actually, let go of this thing that's only hurting me.
Hmm. Absolutely. And you said the word that I use a lot in my content online, and I use it with lost parents, and I even use it, when I do the parent panels, is practice. We don't think of this as something that we have to practice, but it absolutely is. I tell people all the time, like, you didn't get on a bike and start riding a bike for the first time, right? You're asking your body to do a complete 180 after the loss of your child. That takes systems, it takes logistics, it takes practice. So you saying that word is like near and dear to my heart because I do that with my patients all the time and I do that with lost parents all the time.
And I think grief and, everything surrounding it is something that we don't think we have to practice. We think we should just intrinsically like know how to do it and like we don't.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
it's not like we're taught and it's nothing like the textbooks and, it's not the same for everybody and yeah,
Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
complicated.
And I think a lot of it is just it boils down to one of the biggest things is being seen and heard and witnessed. And I tell people this all the time with like little things that come up in life when they're dismissive of their friends who had a bad day, or they're dismissive of, maybe their husband lost their job. I'm like, that's where this starts. Those little things, that's where this starts. If we can have more compassion for people when they have little small things that are, grief like, or are grief, or have changed somebody's life completely that we might not view it as that's a major life change. If we could just sit with those people in those small moments, these huge monumental things would be so much easier because we would have practiced throughout our life rather than just like being walloped and knocked on our butt with something huge. So,
That's so true. I mean, yeah, I think, even those little things that we're so dismissive of, I mean, they matter to people. They completely change people, and we're like, oh, get over it. Like, that's not that bad. But to them, it is. And, we should.
it's a place for you to practice your communication skills, your grief skills, your ability to relate to somebody and communicate with somebody. So I always try to use things moving forward. After I lost my daughter, I recognized it more, of course, but I always try to use really small things. If a friend comes to me with something that seems minute or minuscule to a lot of people, I have to practice. I have to think in my head, even if my first thought is, this doesn't seem like a big deal, Lisa, like, why are we freaking out about this? Then I have to remind myself, like, to her, this is obviously a big deal right now. What is it about this? And how can I guide this conversation so that she feels seen and like I'm showing her compassion? And I just started doing that in everyday things with small little stuff. And then I realized it's a lot easier to then talk with lost parents or, talk with somebody who just lost their mother. Yeah, I think it's important.
When did you first start sharing your lost story? I mean, was it like right after you lost her, or was it later on?
Yeah, actually, so online, it's just been in the last 2 years. I decided 2 years ago that I was going to do it. I actually went to somebody, I wanted to create, my page and a business around loss retreats and everything because I think community is important. And I went to somebody who was like a business mentor and I said, hey, I was told that this is a total fail and that this is not something I should do because nobody is going to want to talk about this. And she said, that's crap. You are going to do this and there's no doubt about that. So I for a long time I waited because I was told years and years and years ago before COVID that it would not be well received because no one wanted to hear about baby loss. Yeah, but before that
Helpful.
I know, right? So helpful. I mean, even the people now who, when we do talk about it and then they're not nice to us in our comments, it's like I just not everything is meant for everyone. Just like keep going, people. Just
Yeah,
scroll on by. Like not
not that
everything is
hard.
Not everything's meant for you. You are not the sole audience member. But before that, I realized that I talked about my daughter a lot in person because I have a small shop in her honor that I really just do to fund the retreats that I have. It's not like a big business, anything like that, and I don't really want it to be. But I would go to craft shows to sell like the headbands I made and all different kind of like things that I did. And that's when I started talking about it because somebody always knew somebody who lost a baby, right? Like, oh, my daughter-in-law's friend just lost a baby, or oh, my aunt has a, niece on the other side or something that lost a baby. And so the recurring theme was nobody ever talked about it and no one ever felt like they could bring it up with their friends and family. And so they would often ask me, you talk openly about this and your mission's like plastered all over your little stand here. And they'd say, like, can I send them your way? Can I have your phone number? And that's when it really started. That's when I really started talking about her. That was years before I came online. That was like right after she died. I'd say like a year after she died, I started doing that. And then it took a whole 7 years after that to get online and be brave enough to advocate for our space.
It is kind of a scary thing to be vulnerable and like put yourself out there. And I mean, especially because, like you said, they're really mean people online who come on and say stuff that I'm like, oh my God, like, would you say that to somebody's face? Some of them I think they would, but it's,
I agree with you.
but yeah, I mean, to just, be vulnerable and do that. I remember, being scared to post her picture the first time. And thankfully, I didn't get any mean comments, but, it's still scary because you don't, I mean, that's your daughter or that's your son or that, that's your baby. And you don't, even if, even if like what they're saying isn't true, it sticks with you. Those
Oh,
mean comments.
absolutely. Yeah. Even if you tell yourself, like, consider the source, right? This doesn't mean anything about me or my child. This means everything about somebody else and how they either view the world or view themselves. Or you're right. It still was said. It's still in the back of your mind. Somebody can't take that back. It sticks with you for sure.
Yeah, and I could not tolerate somebody saying something mean about my daughter. So yeah, I'll just put that out there. Like, don't ever say anything mean, and then we won't have a problem.
But now I do a really good job. I know like most people like know me as being pretty vocal in the space. Like I'm not one to shy away. So now what I do, and I do it not to put anyone on blast. I do it so that other lost parents realize that it's okay to talk about their child. If I get mean comments, I'll just put it on my stories and be like, this is not okay. And this is exactly why I'm showing up how I am, because I'm showing you guys that you can still advocate for yourself. So if somebody sends me like something really terrible and I respond to it, I'll put it right in there and I'll put my response so I can say like, see, this is okay to speak up for yourself. It's okay to speak out. It's okay to, represent your child. It's okay to represent yourself. It's okay to talk about baby loss and pregnancy loss. And that's why I do it, because I feel like I do that everywhere I go and I need to embody that so that other people know that it's okay to do the same thing.
And I love that you do that. I mean, sometimes, sometimes because I read them, I'm like, who said that? But I always like your responses, and I like that you're showing that. Yeah, I mean, it's okay to respond to them, and it's okay
Yeah.
to, you don't
And
have to tolerate it.
no, and some other responses, like usually my responses are very like guided and directed and kind of like almost like, well, I'm sorry that that's how you feel. However, we're allowed to talk about our children. But I'll be the first to admit, we don't always, none of us have our shit in check. Sorry.
Yeah, no,
um,
yeah.
shit in check all the time, right? And so there are times where something even impacts me because a lot of people will come to me in my DMs and they'll say like, how do you stay so calm and collected and controlled? And I'm like, but I'm not always. Like there are times where even something gets under my skin, right? And I'll even post that and show like, okay, this might not have been my best performance because this happens to all of us. Like we're not going to be perfect all the time. We're not going to be perfect at all. Something is going to dig in a little bit more than something else is. But the main point I want to get across is that it's okay to speak up. It's okay to say that wasn't cool. Like maybe we have to choose our words correctly, or maybe we have to choose better words. And sometimes I think, man, Angela, there probably was a better way to say that. But most of the time, no. But sometimes that happens to me. But I want to show people like even I make mistakes. Even I, fly off the handle sometimes when somebody approaches me about my child because it is a very sensitive subject and nothing is ever going to go the way we anticipate that it will. So
Yeah, they just catch you on that one bad day. And it's like, nope. And it's normal. I think that's the other thing I like is that, you're helping people see that, the way they feel about things is normal. Like they're not the only one who feels this way or that way, about various things that we hear or see related to baby loss.
Yes, I would agree with that. I always say that. Like, it's okay to feel any way that you feel.
That was actually something one of the nurses said to me when we left the hospital is whatever you're feeling right now is the right way to be feeling. And
I
that
love it.
has stuck with me. I mean, I don't remember really what anybody else said. I remember that. And so that I really like that.
I love that actually. Yeah. I don't think I've ever heard it said exactly like that. I always tell people similar things, but I like how she said that.
So I know you mentioned your retreats that you do. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Sure. Yeah, yeah, I can. The one thing I always wanted to do when I came into the space when I started, doing the headband little crafts stands and stuff at little festivals, I always wanted to hold infant and pregnancy loss retreats. Having said that, I have experience with, geriatric patients. One of the things I love in my profession as a speech pathologist is I love any neuro-based, diseases or communication deficits, swallowing deficits, anything that's neuro-based. So even if it's a degenerative disease such as Parkinson's or something like that, or maybe it's acquired, a stroke, right? And so I always saw such great progress with my patients who are involved in the community or involved in support groups. So one major thing in my profession is something that we call aphasia. And it's when you have difficulty pretty much speaking. I'm just going to kind of like make a brief summary of it. Language based deficits, they might not be able to get their words out to express themselves. They might also not understand what people are saying to them. And there's just a fancy word we use for that, and it's called aphasia. And so a lot of people avoid going to the supermarket, avoid going out to eat, avoid, basic everyday activities of daily living because they are worried about how their words are going to come out, if they're going to come out. They're worried to drive because if they get pulled over, a cop won't understand that they have aphasia rather than being drunk, right? That has happened several times to my patients. And so you don't really have a lot of people to talk about that with, right? And so I was one of the leaders on one of our stroke areas in the hospital. That was our aphasia support group. And so when I saw the differences in patients who were in that group versus patients who were not in that group, it made me think, man, this is probably the same way with infant and pregnancy loss parents. So I knew immediately the support inside community and inside of a group. So I knew that I wanted to do that. And so for years, again, work a full-time job, kind of just like put it off, said, oh, I'm doing these little craft shows. I'm gaining the money to do this and everything. And then finally, the first year I did it, I was going to do it. I had everything booked to do it on the border of Virginia, North Carolina, and then they got their hurricane. So I had to cancel the entire thing.
Terrible timing.
Yeah. And so that was a no-go. And then I just did it for the following year. So now I am hosting retreats 2 annually, one on the West Coast, one on the East Coast. And they are going to alternate because what I've also noticed is that people will message me and say, I want to come so bad, but I wish you were coming to the Midwest, or I want to come so bad, but you're in Pacific Northwest and I am down in San Diego. Or so I realized that I can't service everybody and not everyone can travel, right? Because a lot of lost parents have other children and they have families and they have husbands and they're running households. So it has to be somewhat close for a lot of people. So yeah, now I am just every time I hold the 2, it'll probably still be East Coast and West Coast, or maybe like one in the Midwest or something like that. But I'm doing 2 of them in different areas of the country every single year. And that's what I started doing. And it's very informal. It's not like some big bougie thing where, you see these Costa Rica retreats and things like that. It's not like that. It pretty much feels like you are at a home with sorority sisters or something for the weekend, and you have good food, you have good company. We have different sessions, whether it's group therapy, yoga, journaling workshops. We do a craft together with our children and everything, hot tub, just some downtime to chat and kind of get to know each other. And then afterwards we all just kind of have a group message in Telegram where at any time if somebody's having a bad day, they can jump in and say like, hey, I'm really having a bad day today and I'm struggling. Like, and it's the people that you got to hang out with for the entire weekend and got to know you and your baby. So it's pretty informal actually, but just a close knit group, no more than like 7 or 8 people. And that's what I started doing.
That sounds amazing, though. I mean, I don't think you need that big, expensive trip. Like, you just need a group of people that understand what you're going through and that you can bond with. And I think that I like the informal approach personally. But so if
Yeah,
you ever
yeah.
feel like coming to Texas,
I like Texas actually. I almost bought a house in Texas.
really,
Yeah. I went
you
on
weren't
a
scared off by the heat.
no, I like to be hot. So I was cool with it. I was like, if I just get a pool or I make sure I have
Yeah,
AC or something. Wait, what part of Texas do you live in?
I'm in the Dallas area.
Okay. I did a convention for Speech Path in Austin. And that's when I joked going there. And I was like, who sends someone to Texas for a convention? And then when I got to Austin, I was like, wow, this is really nice. So I like
Yeah.
Texas.
Austin is a little different than up here, but I mean, we're still cool up here too. I know Texas gets a lot of hate, but but
I
yeah,
don't hate
well, good. I mean, if you're ever around, love to meet you.
That would be lovely. Maybe I can have a loss retreat close by.
Yeah. Where are you having them next? Like, where are your next locations that you're
That's a
planning?
great question. I am having one outside of Asheville area in North Carolina. So I figure a nice little mountain. Actually, who am I kidding? They're both mountain retreats this year. And then Salt Lake City, Utah. Yeah. So Salt Lake is in September, and the North Carolina one is in October. I tried to time it for the fall leaves because if anyone was traveling and they haven't seen the East Coast fall, I figured that would be a good time for them.
I've never actually been to either of those locations, but I've heard good things about both of them.
Yeah, they're both really, really nice areas. But I'm also biased because if you ask for me a beach or a mountain, I'm going to pick a mountain every time.
Yeah.
So it means that next year I'm going to have to do beach ones because I feel like my bias is kind of coming in there.
You're
But
like, all right, I guess I have to make other people happy too.
yeah. There's just
Yeah.
something healing about being in the mountains. There's also something healing about being by the ocean too, of course. You just have to make sure that you have enough activity there because it can get very easy to just kind of be like, let's just go sit by the ocean.
Right.
So
Yeah, I can see that definitely. And then it's like, well, we haven't really done anything. We're just sitting here. I mean, which is nice, but
yeah.
yeah, that's not the point of the retreat, right?
Yeah. Especially because a lot of times a lot of the healing modalities do incorporate a lot of, nature or hiking or sometimes even just being grounded in that space. And there's something to be said for being engulfed in it as opposed to looking over something. I don't know.
No, I mean, I can see that. I can see what you're saying.
But I do
Yeah.
have to mix it up.
Yeah.
So if anyone is listening, I'm not opposed to the beach. So don't think that.
Do you post about it on your social media, or like if people are wanting to follow that or learn information about
Yeah,
those?
absolutely. Yeah, on my Instagram account is where I predominantly post. I predominantly post in my stories and things like that. Anyone can always DM me about it. I also offer a scholarship for each retreat. So somebody can come completely free of charge. I use like I said, my little shop that's just kind of a hobby to kind of fund those retreats for the scholarship for people. So if anyone wanted that too, they can ask me for the application. Applications this year close July 31st for both of them. But yeah, so I know that money is tight for a lot of people, and I know a lot of people can't afford to come, and they're like, oh, I would love to come to this, but it's just not in my price range. And I try to keep the retreats really, really inexpensive too. Like I just try to kind of just enough to cover everything and then like maybe my travel there or something like that. I try not to like it's not like a $5,000 retreat or anything like that. I just try to do it so that it can break even and maybe have a little bit money left over for anything that the people need that come to it, any emergencies, anything like that. But yeah, so they can apply for the scholarship too. It was something I definitely wanted to do.
I love that you're doing that too, because you're right. I mean, even when we lose babies, we have medical bills, we have
Mhm.
funeral expenses, we other children. I mean, just various things that happen. And I like that you're making it as accessible as you can for everybody who wants to be able to come.
Yeah, and like I said, a lot sometimes like even if I depending on how much I sell in my little hobby there, if I can do more than one scholarship or if I can do one and a half or something like that, then I'll even do that. Anything to try to make it more accessible for everybody.
Well,
But yeah, yeah, you can get information on Instagram. That's where I predominantly am. I will admit I've not been posting that much lately. I had a crazy personal life thing go on in the last couple of months, but I have done my own inner work that I preach to everybody else. I took time for me. The two things I needed to regulate were my sleep and my nutrition. I've done that. And now I'm back at the game. So I know a few people were messaging me like, "Are you okay? You're usually always around." And I was like, "I'm good. Don't worry." And now I'm going to be able to share that too. So if anyone's interested, I'm going to be sharing a lot about the last 2 months of my journey re-regulating my nervous system that was in a grief realm other than child loss, but both of which you utilize a lot of the same tools and strategies. So if anyone is looking for, nervous system regulation or, hey, I've tried this or this and this and it hasn't worked, I'll be posting like crazy on my stories to show everybody like what was helpful for me anyway.
that's something I'm definitely interested. I'll have to keep an eye
Yeah.
out for that because I actually think that the nervous system regulation is not something that we talk about or know about, or, you just hear the word, you're like, okay, like what does that even mean? So I think that'll be really helpful to a lot of people.
I think so too. And I think it's really easy for people to just, like you said, it's you hear about it, you hear the words, it's a blanket statement, or there are certain practices that are associated with that and people just immediately think of those practices but they don't know what that means, right? They can't assign meaning outside of just knowing, like maybe people know yoga. Oh, I was told I should go to yoga because my breathing could regulate my nervous system. Well, that's great, but what does that look like for you? Right. And that's the other thing. Like anything we practice nervous system wise could be different for each specific person. Techniques are the same usually, but what does that look like for that person? So you bring up a very, very good point. And I always tell people I'm here as like a vehicle to give information. Even in my normal everyday profession, my number one thing that I love, love, love more than anything is the education side of my job. And I always tell people I'm not the swallow police. I'm not here to tell you you can or can't eat. I'm not here to tell you how to communicate. I'm here to give you the tools and the vehicle to be able to tailor that to you. And I do the same thing with my loss page. I'm not here to say this is right, this is wrong. I'm here to say, here are your options. Find what's right for you.
Yeah, which I think is really important because like we've said, there isn't one right way to go about it, and what works for one person may not work for another person. So I think you just laying it all out there saying you can try these, and see if any of them work for you. Not you have to do it my way.
Yeah, no, no way, no way. I always say there's more than, well, I can't say that. I was going to say the idiom that we use in our English language all the time, but I got yelled at by a colleague. Oh, yeah. I was going to say there's more than one way to skin a cat, but a colleague said to me, "Oh, no, no, you cannot say that. Like, maybe like there's more than one way to cut a carrot." She's like, "You can't, that's not okay to say in my culture." And I was like, "I'm so sorry." So
Oh, I didn't even know that would be a cultural thing. Okay.
so I don't say that anymore. But my point is there is more than one way to do that. And everybody's different. So
Yeah, now I'm like, I better not ever say that again. You know, you
oh,
never know
right.
who you're
And
accidentally offending.
I know. So I just said it on here though. So I'm sorry to anyone that I
But
have
you put a
might have
disclaimer. It's okay.
I did, right? So and it teaches people maybe see we can think about what we say then, right? And there's more than one way to cut a carrot. We can always say things differently. There we go. That's our lesson for today.
Well, is there anything else that you want to share, add about anything?
That's a good question. I don't think so. I think I guess the one thing I do want to say is I will never say, I'm always one that will say, I will never say that somebody is grieving wrong, right? Never will say somebody is grieving incorrectly. But I do then always go on to say, but there is one thing that is incorrect. And the only incorrect thing when you're going through this journey is to not do what you need to do. Like, is to not prioritize yourself. That's always going to be number one. And I know a lot of people will fight me on that. A lot of people will be like, no, my family's number one, or my kids obviously are number one, right? Or this is number one. And I say every time, like, yes, I lost Aviana and I would have taken care of her, like, you know, amazingly. However, if you are not taking care of yourself, you still cannot take care of that child. You still cannot take care of your mother. You still cannot have the best version of you if you are not taking care of you. So that best version can't show up for the other people in your life if you aren't taking care of you. So I will say that every single time. So people will push back to me. And sometimes I'm known to be a little vocal and no filter, and they'll say, well, that's not true, or that's not fair. How can you say that? Or you don't know my life. And I'm like, I know I don't know your life, and you are absolutely right. But you cannot convince me that you are not the most important person, because you can't pour from an empty cup. You just can't. And I am living proof of that in the most recent thing I went through, right? And that's another reason I'm going to put that on my page, even though it's not related to child loss. I was suffering. I couldn't show up for my job in the way I needed to. I shouldn't show up for my friends, my family. My nervous system was so dysregulated that I could not do that. So you have to show up for you first. That is my disclaimer.
No, I think that's super important because, I mean, I think we're taught that we have to show up for everybody else and not ourselves. So that's what we expect. And I mean, yeah, I know that could be a whole other podcast on its own about all that, but I think that is a very important message that you leave people with.
Yeah, I think it's huge. So I'm more than happy to chat about it at some time with anyone who wants to. So
Well, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story today.
thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. And I love everything that you do for all of us.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much, Angela, for sharing your story with us. One of the biggest takeaways from this episode is that grief isn't something we move on from, but it's something that we learn how to carry. And healing doesn't mean forgetting, and it is possible to hold both deep pain and hope at the same time. I hope that Angela's story reminded you that your grief is valid, your love for your child will always matter, and you don't have to navigate this journey alone. No matter where you are in your healing, I hope you found just one small moment that made you feel seen or heard and gave you hope for the road ahead. If this episode resonated with you, please consider sharing it with a friend who might need it, or leave a quick review on Apple or Spotify. Your support helps more loss and infertility parents find hope after loss. Thank you so much for tuning in, and remember, we are all in this together.